if you just eat like a very high-fat diet, because fat doesn't raise your blood sugar at all, so you control your blood sugar, keep it below 120 at all times. You're reading your CGM and it just doesn't spike. But you're still living in a state of insulin resistance, right? And you're going to try to do that for your life. There are some examples, though. Like Dr. Bernstein had a big profile, wrote books and things. He was kind of you guys before you guys came along. And his program that he sticks to is 50 grams of carbs per day. You're going to eat meat and fat. He's 87. He's still hitting the gym and looking okay. So, and he's got success stories too. So how do you counter this? There's other examples like Virta Health has raised all this money, to...
Right.
I think they're valued at $1 billion or something just to get people to eat fat and keep the blood sugar down, but not to reverse the insulin resistance.
Cyrus, you got this next, but I just want to say real quick, Dr. Bernstein is a living legend. Okay, I respect that guy so much. I want everybody to know we are not against anybody's program. We're not trying to bring something down or if you love it, it's working for you, you're happy. That's great. Kudos to you. That's awesome. Mad respect for everything he's done. We actually, in general, would agree on a lot more things than we don't agree upon. And that guy is also the reason we have blood glucose meters. He was the reason he went and fought for that to actually become a reality, for us to be able to self-treat ourselves in a world where that's not what the doctors wanted for monetary reasons. It's amazing. So kudos to him, and kudos to all the people who are learning from him, and maybe the new modern day ketogenic experts. You're getting rid of fast food, you're moving your body, you're becoming really diligent about everything you're putting in your body, and you're staying in a state of ketosis.
Fasting.
That's amazing. We respect. But nonetheless, when the question comes up, we are still going to answer, why would we choose not to do that? And why do we want to make sure we offer and present another option to the world so that you have a choice? The reason is the research is clear on your statistical chances of what's going to happen when you include more meat and dairy, more eggs, and reduce your consumption, limit your intake of fruits, intact whole grains, beans. You start looking at epidemiological research, you start looking at mechanistical research, you look at stuff on a cellular level, you start looking at the breadth of research, it becomes pretty darn clear that omitting these whole plant foods is not your best statistical chance of reducing your chance of developing the number one cause of death for people living with diabetes, which is heart disease. And if we just stopped there and only talked about what you can do to reduce your chances of developing heart disease, I believe the case is already made. So that's my answer, and Cyrus can continue.
Yeah, okay. So a simple way to think about this is that someone like Dr. Bernstein he's an outlier. He's an outlier, and I mean that with all due respect. He's taking phenomenal care of his own personal health, and especially his blood glucose values over the course of many decades. And as a result of that, he's a shining example of what could happen over the course of time if you eat a ketogenic diet. Okay? But he's an N of one story in the same way that I'm an N of one story, and Robbie is an N of one story. So if you're going to sort of base your conclusions and try and decide what you're going to do, instead of just looking at N of one stories, what you want to do is actually take a look at a wider collection of research and see what happens to people in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. So for that, you have to go to the scientific research. Now, if you look in the scientific research for studies that have followed people eating a ketogenic diet, okay, and when I say long-term research, I'm talking about research that is conducted over a minimum of 5 years, hopefully closer to 10, maybe 15 years. So if you look for ketogenic studies that have lasted between 5 to 10 to 15 years, guess how many you will find?
Not very many. Yeah, that's what I thought.
There are none. Okay, there are no studies that have gone that have studied the ketogenic diet in over that duration. So that's cause for concern number one. The question is, well, why would that be the case? Right? Has it not been around for long enough? Maybe, but the ketogenic diet, the name the ketogenic diet is just the most recent iteration of the very low carbohydrate diet. But the ketogenic diet has been around for a long time, ever since Atkins first invented it back in the 1970s. So it has been around for 50 years at this point, but yet we don't have any we have zero long-term studies. Now, if you take a look at Virta Health as an example, I know Sammy, the CEO. He's a good guy. He's a really good guy. There's no question about him.
But what if we could reverse it completely? That's the goal and health moonshot of my guest today, Sami Inkinen, the co-founder of Verda, which startup health backed in 2020. Inkinen is not just any health tech founder. Before starting Verda, he disrupted the real estate market by co-founding Trulia, which he then sold to Zillow for $2.5 billion.
So anything that I say here about Verda is not meant to be a personal attack on him or anybody at the company. But if you take a look at their research, what you'll find is that their longest study is 2 years. What their ketogenic intervention did was it lowered their total carbohydrate intake in substitution for more fat and more protein-rich foods, likely from animal sources. And what they found was that there was a dramatic reduction in the need for insulin, for exogenous insulin. There was like an 80-something% reduction in insulin requirements, which is great. However, if you take a look at their fasting blood glucose values, their fasting blood glucose values are indicative of having type 2 diabetes because they're still greater than 125 milligrams per deciliter. It's not great.
Cyrus offered to take us through the Verda paper, but we had to do it on a different day, and here it is.
The paper that I want to draw your attention to is this paper right here, published in 2019 in June. In this paper, the scientists at Verda are reporting on the results of a 2-year non-randomized clinical trial that involved 262 people that went through their education and coaching program versus 87 participants, all of which were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And these 87 participants went through the standard of care recommendations given by the American Diabetes Association. So I'm going to fast forward to the data that they present at this in this paper at 2 years. And the reason I chose this paper in particular is because there's a significant amount of data that demonstrates that a ketogenic diet can definitely lower your blood glucose, lower your blood pressure, accelerate body weight loss, and lower your triglyceride level within in the short term, within the first 10 weeks to 3 months to 6 months. And Verda themselves had actually published a paper demonstrating this exact thing, which is that when they transitioned patients to their ketogenic approach, they got dramatic improvements in their glycemia within the first 10 weeks, which is great. But if we zoom out and we say, okay, well, what happens to these people over the course of 2 years? The story becomes both promising and also not promising at the same time. So the data that you see on the screen right here presents what happened to individuals from their baseline values all the way through the 2-year time point. So we have 3 columns. We have baseline, we have what happened at 1 year, and then we also have what happened at 2 years. If you follow just their A1C values, what you'll find is that their baseline A1C values were approximately 7.7 as a group. That 7.7 value then decreased by 1.3% to get to 6.3 at the 1-year marker, but then it actually increased back up to 6.7 at the 2-year marker. So the goal is to take these individuals and lower their A1C to less than 6.5% if you're going to claim that these individuals no longer have type 2 diabetes. And in an ideal world, their A1C would actually come lower than 5.7% because that would indicate that they no longer have prediabetes or impaired glucose tolerance. But what you see is that their A1C fell from 7.7 down to 6.7%. And an A1C value of 6.7% indicates that they're still living with type 2 diabetes. The reason why this is important is because the conclusion in this paper is that they got a significant proportion of the people who went through their education and coaching program to reverse type 2 diabetes altogether. But if you take a look at just the A1C value, you'll see that they're actually still living with an A1C that's congruent with that of type 2 diabetes. So that's confusing point number 1. Confusing point number 2 is that their fasting glucose started at 163, and then at the 1-year marker fell to 127, and then by the 2-year marker was now back up to 134. So a fasting glucose greater than 125 is considered type 2 diabetes. Again, their fasting glucose is 134 at the 2-year marker, suggesting again that these individuals are still living with type 2 diabetes. In addition to that, if we scroll down even further into the research, what we will find is that their LDL cholesterol actually went in the wrong direction. Their total cholesterol also went in the wrong direction. At baseline, their total cholesterol was 184 milligrams per deciliter. And after 2 years, their total cholesterol had actually risen to 194. And their LDL cholesterol was at 103 to begin with, and it actually rose to 114. other markers of their cardiovascular metabolism improved. Their HDL cholesterol went up from 41 to 49, and their triglyceride concentration fell from 197 down to 153. We know from ample scientific evidence that the total amount of LDL cholesterol in circulation is the most important indicator of your future cardiac disease risk. I'll say that one more time. We know from ample scientific evidence that's conducted in meta-analysis of over 1 million individuals that the total amount of LDL cholesterol in circulation, regardless of whether it's small dense particles or large fluffy particles, the total amount of LDL cholesterol is an independent predictor of your risk for a future cardiac event. So for an LDL cholesterol to increase over the course of some type of nutritional intervention is alarming, because what that indicates is that even if other markers of their cardiovascular metabolism are improving, their risk for the development of coronary artery disease and heart disease is actually increasing. And finally, if we take a look at their two other indicators of their metabolism, we'll see that the beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration, this is a marker that's used to determine whether or not an individual is living in a ketotic state or not. The number that you're looking for is greater than 0.5. If your beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration is greater than 0.5, what that means is that you're in a state of ketosis, and that state of ketosis is then supposed to confer a number of short-term and long-term benefits. At baseline, participants had a beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration of 0.18, which indicates they were not in a ketotic state. And at the 2-year marker, their beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration had only risen to 0.27, which indicates, again, they're still not in a ketotic state. And they address this in the paper where they say that only approximately 50% of the individuals in their program were actually living in a ketotic state, which demonstrates that at the 2-year marker, the adherence to their ketotic protocol was actually quite low. And that's alarming, because a lot of the research that's conducted in the world of ketogenic diets is actually short-term research, simply because it is hard to adhere to a ketosis regimen. The final thing I'll say about this paper is that these high-sensitivity C-reactive protein concentrations are also alarming. At the beginning of the study, individuals had a high-sensitivity C-reactive protein of 7.45, which is a very accurate measure of total body inflammation. So any number greater than approximately 1 nanomole is considered elevated, and they started with a 7.45 nanomolar concentration. So that means that there's significant total body inflammation. At the end of the 2-year period, their C-reactive protein had fallen to 4.69, which again is an indicator that they're still in an inflammatory state. Yes, it did decrease. However, anything greater than 1 indicates that there's still a significant amount of total body inflammation that hasn't been fully addressed. So this is alarming to me, and something that is well worth talking about, because the way that people talk about the Verda approach in the public is different than what the actual science says. The science doesn't look that promising, but what people say is, oh wow, Verda is reducing type 2 diabetes incidence. Verda is reversing type 2 diabetes, and that's the phraseology that they use on their website, in their marketing, and also within prominent scientific publications.